What if I told you that some of the brightest stars in Hollywood didn't fade, they simply walked away? We tend to think of fame as a force too powerful to resist. Once it wraps around a star, it clings like gravity, impossible to escape. And yet, some did. Not because they were ruined, not because they were forgotten, but because, at the height of their fame, they made a different choice. They left. They turned their backs on the cameras, the premieres, the millions. Not in scandal, not in shame, but in silence. Some left to protect something purer than image, a family, a belief, a version of themselves untouched by the machinery of myth-making. Others vanished without explanation, letting their legacy freeze in time untainted, unresolved, immortal, not because they stayed, but precisely because they didn't. Greta Garbo disappeared while still a goddess. Cary Grant walked away as Hollywood's perfect man. Audrey Hepburn traded couture for UNICEF. And Daniel Day-Lewis, with 3 Oscars in hand, chose a final exit instead of another role. This is not a story about failure. It's about restraint, about knowing the moment before the lights burn too hot, before the applause starts sounding hollow. But what does it take to walk away from immortality? And in doing so, do you become more mythical or more human? These are the 20 stars who vanished on their own terms. Each departure, a quiet rebellion. Each silence, louder than any encore. Let's begin. 1. Greta Garbo, the goddess who chose silence. At the height of her fame, Greta Garbo was more than a star, she was a myth. With eyes that pierced the screen and a presence that made silence feel like thunder, she captivated the world in the 1,920 seconds and 30 seconds. But then, one day, she was gone. In 1941, after Two-Faced Woman, Garbo retreated from the spotlight. No scandal, no dramatic farewell, she simply stopped. At 35, with Hollywood begging for her return, she turned her back on it all. The cameras, the adoration, the power. She moved to New York, walked the streets unnoticed, refused all interviews, and never acted again. For decades, fans hoped for a comeback. Directors sent scripts, producers offered fortunes. She declined every time. Her silence became a kind of presence louder than words. Was she protecting something? Preserving the image of herself the world adored? Or did she understand that becoming a legend sometimes requires stepping away before time can tarnish the glow? Garbo's exit wasn't a retreat. It was a choice, a haunting one, and it set the tone for every mysterious disappearance that followed. 2. Sean Connery, the icon who refused to decay. He was James Bond. He was the immortal voice of authority in the hunt for Red October, the charming rogue in The Rock. Sean Connery wasn't just a star, he was a pillar. And then, after The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, in 2003, he vanished. He didn't just slow down, he quit. At 73, Connery said he was done. Hollywood had changed, he claimed. Too many explosions, too little soul. Studios no longer respected actors, only algorithms. He declined Spielberg's calls, ignored franchise revivals, and retreated to the Bahamas. Many believed he would return. After all, Connery never seemed tired on screen, but he stayed quiet, even in the face of tributes and pressure. His final public statement? Silence. He died in 2020, never having stepped in front of a camera again. The man who defined masculine cool ended his career not with a bang, but with a locked door. Was it stubbornness or self-respect? When a man leaves while still beloved, does he preserve his myth or rob us of more? Connery chose to walk off stage before time could steal the applause, and he never looked back. 3. Gene Hackman, the disappearing master. Gene Hackman was everywhere. From The French Connection to Unforgiven, he could be terrifying, tender, or both. With 2 Oscars and a filmography that made younger actors tremble, Hackman was a master craftsman, one of the last of his kind. And then he disappeared. After Welcome to Mooseport in 2004, a comedy few remember, Hackman quietly stepped away. No press release, no farewell interviews, just absence. While the industry speculated, Hackman was already somewhere else, writing novels and living quietly in New Mexico. What makes his departure eerie is its lack of spectacle. He simply stopped. He later confirmed in an interview years later that he was retired for good, but the tone wasn't bitter, it was peaceful. Unlike stars who fade due to failure, Hackman left at full power not because he had to, but because he'd said what he needed to say. Was it contentment, disillusionment, a quiet protest? In the age of reboots and comebacks, Hackman's silence feels almost radical, as if he knew that some legacies grow stronger when you stop adding to them. 4. Doris Day, the star who chose animals over applause. To the world, Doris Day was sunshine bottled, cheerful, wholesome, the girl next door, with a voice that could soothe any storm. But behind the brightness was a woman growing disillusioned with the industry that made her a symbol. After decades of hits, from Pillow Talk to The Man Who Knew Too Much, Day found herself increasingly at odds with Hollywood's expectations. The studio system wanted her to remain eternal youth, but life, as always, had other plans. Following the death of her third husband and a bitter lawsuit that revealed she'd been mismanaged financially, Day shifted course. She didn't announce a grand exit. Instead, she quietly refused scripts, declined interviews, and moved to Carmel by the Sea. There, she devoted herself to animal welfare, founding the Doris Day Animal League and spending her days rescuing strays. She never formally retired, but the message was clear. Her purpose had changed. In a world where fame is clung to desperately, Day let it go gently. Was it grief that pushed her away, or a deeper clarity about what mattered? She could have chased a late career comeback. Instead, she chose dogs, not deals, and somehow that made her glow even brighter in memory. 5. Cary Grant, the man who let the curtain fall while still smiling. Cary Grant didn't just define the Hollywood leading man, he invented it. Suave, witty, impossibly elegant, Grant was the epitome of screen perfection. But in 1966, at age 62, after Walk Don't Run, he quit acting. Just like that. No scandal, no box office failure, he was still beloved, still beautiful, and yet he said no more. Why? Because, according to Grant himself, I had said everything I wanted to say on film. He turned his focus to fatherhood, becoming a first-time dad in his 60s in business, serving on the board of companies like Fabergé. Studios pleaded. Directors sent scripts. He remained unmoved. Grant had spent decades perfecting an image. He knew the camera adored him. But perhaps he understood that time, eventually, would not. By leaving at his peak, he froze his legacy in place. No aging performances, no fading charm, just Cary Grant, eternal. Was it vanity? Or wisdom? Whatever the reason, his exit was as graceful as his screen presence, a final bow without a stumble. Number 6. Deborah Kerr, the queen who vanished to Europe. There was something haunting in Deborah Kerr's performances, a stillness, a deep current of emotion beneath impeccable poise. From The King and I to An Affair to Remember, she was elegance incarnate, and then, slowly, she was gone. In the early 1980 seconds, after a few TV appearances and her final role in The Assam Garden, Kerr retreated from the industry. She didn't make headlines. She didn't seek applause. Instead, she moved to Spain, then to Switzerland, far from the red carpets that once adored her. She wasn't forgotten, but she stopped playing the game. No memoir, no tell-all. She never chased the nostalgia circuit like some of her peers. Perhaps she believed that some careers should end with dignity, not with a fade-out, but with a quiet close. She passed away in 2007, leaving behind a filmography untouched by desperation. Her silence was not absence, it was intention. And in that quiet, she may have said more than any final performance ever could. 7. Jean Seberg, the muse who fled the spotlight. Jean Seberg's face defined a cinematic revolution. With Breathless, she became the icon of French New Wave, delicate, defiant, unforgettable, but her beauty masked turbulence. After conquering both Europe and Hollywood, Seberg became politically outspoken, publicly supporting the Black Panther Party. In response, the FBI targeted her in its COINTELPRO campaign. She was surveilled, smeared, and driven into emotional collapse. Tabloids falsely claimed she'd conceived a child with a black activist. Her real child died shortly after birth. Hollywood didn't come to her defense. Her film roles dwindled, directors hesitated, she drifted back to Europe, then further into isolation. By the late 70s, she was living in Paris, rarely seen in public. In 1979, her body was found in a car, parked for days, an overdose, officially ruled a suicide. But the greater tragedy was how Hollywood, having once embraced her ethereal presence, watched her disappear in silence. Did she leave fame, or did it leave her? And when the cost of visibility is surveillance and humiliation, is vanishing an act of survival? Number 8. Audrey Hepburn, the angel who left to heal the world. Audrey Hepburn could have ruled cinema forever. With Roman Holiday, Breakfast at Tiffany's, and My Fair Lady, she was more than a star, she was a global ideal. But in the late 1960 seconds, she quietly stepped back. After a series of personal losses and a growing unease with Hollywood's direction, Hepburn chose not to chase roles. Instead, she married again, moved to Switzerland, and dedicated her later life to humanitarian work with UNICEF. In famine-ravaged Ethiopia, war-torn Sudan, and bombed-out Vietnam, she stood no makeup, no lights, holding starving children, comforting displaced mothers. She didn't seek cameras, yet the world followed her still. Her rare return to film, Always, 1989, felt like a whisper, not a comeback. Was it guilt, compassion, or simply clarity? She had already given beauty to the screen. Now she gave it to the world. And in doing so, Audrey Hepburn may have transcended even the immortality Hollywood once promised her. 9. Rick Moranis, the funny man who put family first. Rick Moranis wasn't supposed to vanish. With Ghostbusters, Spaceballs, and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, he was everywhere, quirky, lovable, unforgettable. And then, without fanfare, he disappeared. In 1991, Moranis' wife died of cancer, leaving him to raise their 2 young children alone. Faced with the choice between career and fatherhood, he chose the latter. He didn't make a press tour out of it. He simply stopped accepting roles. No tabloids, no tell-all interview, just 2 kids and a dad who used to be famous. For years, offers came, scripts piled up. He turned them down. Hollywood assumed he'd be back. He never really was. A brief cameo in recent years reminded fans of what had been lost, but it wasn't regret, just a quiet wave. In a world obsessed with comebacks, Moranis' choice feels almost radical. What if the real legacy isn't how long you stay, but how gracefully you leave? 10. Bridget Fonda, the starlet who vanished by choice. Bridget Fonda had the pedigree, the talent, and the timing. Born into Hollywood royalty, she carved her own path with roles in Point of No Return, Single White Female, and Jackie Brown. In the 90 seconds, she seemed destined for superstardom, and then she was gone. Her last on-screen appearance was in 2002. After that, nothing. No press, no scandal, no farewell. She simply disappeared. Marrying composer Danny Elfman and becoming a stepmother, Fonda turned her back on the industry, not out of bitterness, but, it seems, peace. When paparazzi caught her in public years later, fans were stunned. She looked different. She looked too real. She had aged. Happily, she later confirmed, she has no interest in returning. Hollywood tried to label it a loss, but maybe it was a victory. In walking away, Fonda reclaimed something few actresses are allowed to keep: her life, uncurated. 11. Sondra Locke, the talent Hollywood erased. Sondra Locke's disappearance wasn't voluntary, but it was absolute. After earning an Oscar nomination for The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, she became Clint Eastwood's partner on and off screen. They made films together. She moved into his world, but when the relationship ended, so did her career. Locke sued Eastwood, alleging he used his influence to sabotage her directing deals and blacklist her. In court, evidence surfaced: fake production deals, industry stonewalling. She won, but the damage was done. She never acted in another major film again. Hollywood didn't banish her with headlines. It erased her quietly, efficiently. Locke didn't fight for a comeback. She wrote a memoir and then disappeared. Was it bitterness that kept her silent, or exhaustion? In the end, she became a ghost in an industry she once illuminated. And sometimes, vanishing isn't an escape, it's exile disguised as choice. 12. Shelley Long, the sitcom queen who walked away from Cheers. At the peak of TV fame, Shelley Long was America's witty dream girl. As Diane Chambers on Cheers, she earned Emmys, admiration, and cultural immortality. And then, after 5 seasons, she left. Not because she was fired, not because the show was failing, she just didn't want to stay. Long later admitted she felt the character had run its course. She feared being typecast. She wanted to pursue film, but the transition wasn't smooth. A few movie roles followed, but none recaptured the magic. Hollywood didn't forgive her for leaving Cheers. The narrative became one of decline, as if stepping off a hit show was a sin. But Long didn't apologize. She made her choice, lived with it, and slowly receded from public life. Today, her absence is remembered almost as vividly as her presence. When you leave the stage too soon, do you invite regret or preserve something the world can't distort? 13. Jake Lloyd, the boy who wasn't allowed to grow up. Jake Lloyd was 9 years old when he became Anakin Skywalker. The Phantom Menace was meant to catapult him into superstardom. Instead, it crushed him. Critics lambasted his performance. Fans, the very audience he hoped to please, turned cruel. Interviews, classrooms, even playgrounds became battleground. The ridicule wasn't just online, it was in his life every day. By 2001, Lloyd quit acting entirely. He burned his Star Wars memorabilia. He refused interviews. Later, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. His story became a cautionary tale, but one few seemed to learn from. Hollywood never apologized. He didn't fall from grace. He was pushed. Jake Lloyd didn't vanish in silence. He was erased by a noise he never asked for. And in his absence, we're left to wonder, what happens when the dream becomes the trauma? Number 14. Meg Tilly, the almost Oscar winner who chose the garden. Meg Tilly was poised for greatness. After a standout role in Agnes of God, she was nominated for an Academy Award and hailed as one of the most promising actresses of the 80 seconds. But shortly after, she disappeared from the mainstream. She moved to British Columbia, raised a family, and began writing novels. In rare interviews, she described Hollywood as exhausting, performative, false. She didn't hate it, she just didn't need it. Offers still came. She declined most. Years later, she returned briefly to TV, but the spark of ambition was absent, replaced by calm. A woman who'd once walked red carpets now tended her garden and wrote quietly by the window. Tilly didn't vanish in tragedy, she simply redefined success. And in doing so, she reminded us, some stars burn brightest when no one's watching. 15. Jack Gleason, the king who chose obscurity. Jack Gleason played one of the most hated characters in television history, Joffrey Baratheon from Game of Thrones. He was brilliant, loathed, memorable, and then he quit. At 21, Gleason announced he was done with acting, not because of scandal or burnout, but because he simply didn't enjoy it. Fame felt invasive, publicity felt hollow, the machinery of celebrity felt toxic. He returned to academia, focused on theater, and avoided the spotlight. No agent, no Hollywood grind, just quiet. For someone who had just conquered the most watched show in the world, it was a jarring turn. But Gleason didn't flinch. Was it wisdom beyond his years? Or a desperate need for peace? Either way, his exit was clean, a sovereign decision from a king who never wanted the crown. 16. Phoebe Cates, the icon who chose the living room over the limelight. For a brief, shimmering moment in the 1,980 seconds, Phoebe Cates was everywhere. From Fast Times at Ridgemont High to Gremlins. She was the dream girl, luminous, grounded, unforgettable. And then she vanished. In 1994, after marrying actor Kevin Kline and raising a family, she quietly retired from acting. No announcements, no last performance, just absence. She opened a boutique in New York, raised her children, and lived a life that, by Hollywood standards, was radically normal. When asked about her career, she offered no regrets, no longing for comebacks, no rehearsed nostalgia, just the contentment of someone who chose her own narrative. Was she avoiding typecasting, escaping industry decay, or simply putting life above legacy? Cates didn't fade out. She stepped away and stayed away. Sometimes, the quietest choices echo the loudest. 17. Joe Pesci, the tough guy who chose jazz. Joe Pesci was intensity incarnate. In Goodfellas, Casino, Raging Bull, he didn't just act, he detonated. Oscars followed. So did Adoration, but then he disappeared. In the late 90 seconds, Pesci stepped away from acting. Hollywood was shocked. He gave no grand speech, no tragic farewell. He just left. Why? Because he wanted to play music. Pesci returned to his roots: jazz guitar, small recordings, intimate performances. While directors begged him to return, he stayed resolute. Even when he did come back for The Irishman in 2019, it was a whisper, not a return. He never chased the spotlight. He walked away from it, guitar in hand. In an industry addicted to noise, Pesci found power in quiet, and maybe the real performance was the one he gave when no one was watching. 18. Harold Russell, the real hero who refused to reenact his pain. Harold Russell wasn't a professional actor. He was a World War II veteran who lost both hands in combat. But in The Best Years of Our Lives, 1946, he delivered a performance so raw, so real, it earned him 2 Oscars, a rare dual honor recognizing both acting and inspiration. He could have had a career. Hollywood offered roles, but Russell declined. He didn't want to become a curiosity, a symbol to be paraded. He returned to school, worked for veterans' causes, and lived quietly, occasionally making public appearances to support disabled soldiers, but never seeking fame again. He gave the world one performance and deemed it enough. Was it humility or self-protection? In a town obsessed with sequels, Russell understood the value of a single, unforgettable act. And then, with dignity, he exited. 19. Grace Kelly, the star who traded the screen for a crown. Grace Kelly wasn't just royalty on screen, she became it in life. With Rear Window, To Catch a Thief, and High Society, she captivated audiences with her cool elegance and unshakable poise. Alfred Hitchcock adored her. The Academy embraced her. She was Hollywood's golden ideal. And then, at 26, she quit. In 1956, Kelly married Prince Rainier III of Monaco and became Princess Grace. She left behind a booming career, global fame, and creative promise. Hollywood begged for her return. Hitchcock even designed projects around her, but the answer was always no. She attended to royal duties, raised children, and kept the past at bay. It wasn't scandal or burnout that ended her career, it was a fairy tale. But fairy tales too demand sacrifice. Was her choice romantic, strategic, or a quiet rebellion against being controlled? Kelly died tragically in a car crash in 1982, leaving behind a life split in two, one cinematic, one sovereign. She didn't vanish, she transformed. But in that transformation, Hollywood lost something irreplaceable. 20. Daniel Day-Lewis, the master who chose silence over more applause. 3. Oscars, unanimous critical reverence, a reputation for disappearing into roles with terrifying depth. Daniel Day-Lewis was, by most accounts, the greatest actor of his generation, and then he quit for real. In 2017, after Phantom Thread, he released a statement. He would no longer act, no further explanation, just done. Many thought it was a gimmick, a break, a phase, but Day-Lewis didn't return. He retreated to private life in Ireland, away from interviews and speculation. This wasn't his first disappearance. He'd taken long sabbaticals before working as a cobbler, avoiding press, but this time felt final. Why walk away when you're at the peak of mastery? Some say the roles consumed him. Others believe he sought peace from perfectionism. Maybe it was simply time. But what's certain is this. Daniel Day-Lewis didn't fade. He exited on his own terms, intact, untouched, and unreachable. He gave us characters we'll never forget, and then reminded us that legends are often built not just by what they give, but by what they refuse to give again. Bonus fact: Dolores Hart, the starlet who chose the convent. Dolores Hart was on the brink of becoming a household name. With her debut opposite Elvis Presley in Loving You, 1957, she seemed destined for Hollywood royalty. Critics praised her poise, directors saw longevity, and audiences adored her quiet, dignified charm. But in 1963, at the age of 24, she stunned the world. She left Hollywood, not for scandal, marriage, or artistic retreat, but for God. Hart entered the Abbey of Regina Laudis in Connecticut, becoming a Benedictine nun. No press tour, no tabloid meltdown, just silence, vows, and a total surrender of fame. Her departure baffled everyone. She was young, rising, wanted, the kind of star studios would have built franchises around. And yet, she saw something beyond the spotlight, a calling deeper than the applause. For decades, she lived in obscurity, devoting herself to prayer, community, and service. When God is the Bigger Elvis, a documentary about her life, was nominated for an Oscar in 2012, she returned to the Academy in full habit. Not as a star, but as a woman who chose her path and never looked back. What does it say about fame when someone walks away, not out of pain, but out of clarity? Dolores Hart's story reminds us that sometimes, to find your place in the world, you must leave the stage and listen for a different kind of audience. Not every legacy is built by staying in the spotlight. Some are shaped by the silence that follows a graceful exit. These stars didn't vanish in disgrace or decline, they left on their own terms. At the height of fame, they turned away, and in doing so, became something rarer than icons. They became mysteries. They chose family, peace, dignity, or purpose over immortality. But in choosing to disappear, did they preserve their myth or walk away from it altogether? Which departure struck you the most? And if you had the world's attention, would you know when to let it go? Tell us, is walking away the final proof of greatness, or the beginning of being forgotten?